9 children, one mountain, and a family that seemed for 9 years to be the closest thing American television ever had to a real household, until one by one, the actors who played them began walking away from the cameras of Walton's Mountain, and the reasons why were far more complicated than any scriptwriter could have invented. When The Waltons premiered on CBS in September 1972, nobody in the television industry expected it to survive its first season. It was slow, quiet, unapologetically sentimental, and set during the Great Depression, a period most network executives believed audiences wanted to forget, not revisit. Yet the show, created by Earl Hamner Jr. and based loosely on his own childhood in Schuyler, Virginia, became a genuine phenomenon. Hamner didn't just create the series, he narrated it himself, his voice serving as the adult John Boy looking back on his family with a tenderness that felt lived in because, in many ways, it was. The Walton family, John and Olivia, their 7 children, and grandparents Zeb and Esther, became a cultural fixture, a weekly reminder of resilience during hardship. But behind that warmth, the actors who inhabited these roles were dealing with illness, ambition, tragedy, and the simple, human need to be seen as more than a character they had already outgrown. The most talked-about departure remains Richard Thomas, the actor who played John Boy Walton, the eldest son and the family's aspiring writer, essentially the on-screen stand-in for Earl Hamner Jr. himself. Thomas was the emotional center of the series for its first 5 seasons, and his narration-adjacent presence made him, in many ways, the face of the show. Yet in 1977, after the 5th season, Thomas made the decision to leave. His reasoning, which he has discussed in various interviews over the decades, was twofold. Professionally, he was wary of being permanently identified with a single role. John Boy had made him famous, but Thomas was a trained stage actor from a family of dancers and performers, and he wanted the freedom to build a career beyond Walton's Mountain, taking on film roles and theater work that a long-running television commitment made difficult. Personally, his life had changed dramatically. Thomas and his first wife were expecting quadruplets, an event that reordered his priorities almost overnight. Raising 4 infants at once while filming a demanding television schedule was, by his own account, simply not sustainable. The show attempted to write around his absence rather than kill off the character, sending John Boy to New York to pursue his writing career, which conveniently mirrored what Thomas himself was doing in real life. Eventually, the producers recast the role with actor Robert Whiteman for the final 2 seasons, a decision that fans still debate as one of the more difficult recastings in television history, precisely because Thomas had made the character feel irreplaceable. If Richard Thomas's departure was about ambition and family planning, the story of Will Geer, who played Grandpa Zebulon Walton, was about something far more somber. Geer was already an accomplished stage and film actor by the time he joined the Waltons, known for his rich baritone voice and his decades-long career that had survived the Hollywood blacklist of the 1950s, when his political activism led to him being denied work for years. By the time he took on the role of Grandpa Zeb, Geer was in his late 60s, and audiences fell in love with the warmth and mischief he brought to the character. But in April 1978, Will Geer died of respiratory failure at the age of 76. His death was not a career decision or a contract dispute. It was simply the end of a long and remarkable life. The show's writers made the unusual choice not to recast the role, instead writing Grandpa Zeb's death into the narrative itself, allowing the Walton family and, by extension, the audience, to grieve alongside the fictional characters. It remains one of the more emotionally honest moments in the show's run, largely because the grief on screen mirrored the very real loss the cast and crew had just experienced off-screen. Ellen Corby, who played Grandma Esther Walton, faced her own health crisis that altered the course of her character's arc. In 1976, Corby suffered a stroke that left her with partial paralysis and impaired speech, a devastating setback for an actress in her 60s who had built a career on precise, expressive performances. Rather than writing her off the show entirely, the producers made the decision to incorporate her real recovery into the storyline, having Grandma Esther suffer a stroke as well. It was a rare and, at the time, groundbreaking choice for a network drama, allowing an actress's genuine physical struggle to become part of the narrative rather than hiding it from audiences. Corby continued to appear on the show in a limited capacity for several more seasons, her scenes often written around her condition, until a second stroke in the early 1980s made continued acting untenable. Her resilience, however, was recognized by her peers. She continued to receive industry acknowledgement for her work even as her health declined, a testament to how deeply respected she was within the production. Michael Earned, who played matriarch Olivia Walton, left the show under circumstances that blended fiction and reality in a similarly striking way. By the show's sixth season, Learned had decided she wanted to step back from the demands of a weekly television series to pursue other creative opportunities, including stage work, which had always been her first professional love before television made her a household name. The writers handled her exit by having Olivia Walton diagnosed with tuberculosis and sent to a New Mexico sanatorium for treatment, effectively removing the character from the mountain for an extended period. Learned did return for occasional guest appearances in later seasons and in the television reunion films that followed the series' original run, but her reduced presence in the later seasons marked a clear turning point for the show, which had, by that point, already lost several of its original anchors. Learned has spoken candidly in interviews over the years about wanting to avoid being creatively confined by a single character, echoing a sentiment shared by Richard Thomas, the fear that a beloved role, however good for a career in the short term, could become a professional cage in the long term. Ralph Waite, who played John Walton Sr., remained with the series for its entire original run, but his career path after The Waltons is worth noting because it illustrates just how differently the show's actors chose to define themselves once the cameras stopped rolling. Waite pursued a wide range of roles afterward, including political ambitions. He ran for Congress in California on multiple occasions, as well as continued acting work well into his 80s, later becoming known to new generations of audiences for his role as the patriarch on NCIS, Los Angeles. His willingness to keep working across genres and mediums stood as a quiet rebuttal to the idea that the Waltons had to define an actor's entire identity, even for those who stayed with the show until its conclusion. The younger cast members, many of whom were children when the series began, experienced their departures and evolving roles differently, shaped as much by the natural process of growing up on camera as by any dramatic behind-the-scenes conflict. Judy Norton, who played Mary Ellen Walton, remained with the show for its full run but has spoken about the strange experience of aging into adulthood in front of a national audience, watching her own adolescence play out as a storyline. John Walmsley, who played Jason Walton, used his time on the series to develop his real-life musical career, an interest the writers eventually incorporated into his character's arc. Mary McDonough, who played Erin Walton, has been especially open in later years about the pressures of being a young actress on a hit family drama, including struggles with body image and self-worth that she has since discussed in memoirs and interviews as part of a broader reckoning with how child actors were supported or often not supported during that era of television production. What becomes clear when looking at the full arc of departures across the Waltons is that no single explanation fits all of them. There was no scandal, no mass walkout, no bitter contract dispute that forced the family apart on screen. Instead, what happened to the cast mirrored, in an almost eerie way, the themes the show itself was built around: growth, loss, illness, ambition, and the passage of time. Richard Thomas left to build a life and a career beyond a role that threatened to define him too narrowly. Will Geer's departure was final in the truest sense, a loss that the show chose to honor rather than paper over. Ellen Corby's health struggles became, unusually for network television at the time, a shared journey between actress and character. Michael Earned stepped away to reclaim creative range. She felt television had begun to narrow. Each decision, whether forced by health, driven by ambition, or shaped by the simple unpredictability of life, reflected something true about the human beings behind the Walton family name, not just the characters they played. It's worth remembering, too, the context in which these decisions were made. Television in the 1970s did not offer the kind of long-term financial security or creative flexibility that streaming-era actors often negotiate today. Contracts were rigid, filming schedules were grueling, and there was little institutional support for actors, particularly aging performers or those with health issues, who needed to step back. Ellen Corby's continued presence on the show despite a debilitating stroke speaks as much to the culture of that era's television production, where actors often felt obligated to keep working regardless of personal cost, as it does to her own individual determination. Similarly, Richard Thomas's choice to leave at the height of his character's popularity was, at the time, considered a genuinely risky career move, one that could have ended in obscurity rather than the varied stage and screen career he went on to build, including his later, well-regarded work in theater and his role in the miniseries adaptation. Earl Hamner Jr., the man whose childhood inspired the entire series, continued narrating the show until its conclusion in 1981, and his voice remained a through line connecting the ever-changing cast to the enduring emotional core of the story. Hamner passed away in 2016, but his reflections on the show, given across numerous interviews throughout his life, consistently emphasized that The Waltons was never meant to be a fantasy of a perfect family. It was meant to be an honest portrait of a family enduring hardship together, and in a strange, almost poetic way, the real-life departures of its actors, through ambition, illness, grief, and growth, only reinforced that honesty. The Walton family on screen faced war, poverty, and loss. The actors who played them faced strokes, fatal illness, career crossroads, and the simple, universal pressure of wanting to be more than one role for the rest of their lives. By the time The Waltons ended its original run in 1981, the ensemble that audiences had fallen in love with nearly a decade earlier looked markedly different from the one that had first walked onto Walton's mountain. Some actors were gone entirely. Others had aged, both on screen and off, in ways the cameras couldn't hide and the writers didn't try to. And yet the show's popularity endured, spawning television reunion movies well into the 1990s that brought many of the surviving cast members back together, an unusual and moving testament to how much the audience still cared about this family, real actors and fictional characters intertwined.